Your classroom
Okay.
doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to have everything, but it
Hmm.
should represent most things.
Okay.
It doesn't have to have
Okay.
everything. You don't need to put everything in the classroom. It's going to disrupt your classroom management when the term begins. So you want to just have that safe middle ground. Not too much, not too little, but just enough
Right.
for the children to explore.
Welcome to this episode of Conversations with AMA. I'm so happy to have you here. And this is the continuation of the series of the Principles of EYFS. And this time we're talking about enabling environment. I'm happy to have an amazing EYFS educator with me. So before we get started, please introduce yourself. Tell us about your journey in the early years education sector.
All right. Thank you so much for having me on your platform. You're doing such an amazing work. I've
Oh,
spent
thank
time
you.
listening to the other educators that have spoken with you, and it's just been, you know how they say learning continues. So
Right.
learning from all the other educators and the experts that have been speaking with you, it's really a very amazing work that you're doing. So
Thank
thank you for having me
you.
here. Well,
Thank
my name is Chiaka Akinwale. The children in my class most times refer to me as Miss Chiaka. I'm an
right.
educator and education consultant. I currently sit on the board for a school in Lagos, the Quiverful
Oh,
School, and
fantastic.
just give them some technical advice. I've been teaching in the early years for a little over a decade.
Oh, wow.
But my mom is a current school owner. She was a teacher for about
Oh,
15 years before she owned, before she went on to start her own school. So yes,
fantastic.
education runs through my blood. My
I can
sister-in-law is an
imagine.
educator, school owner as well. I would say I happened to, will I say, stumble on this passion. I've always loved children, and I knew that I was going to do something with children, right? I always
Right.
knew. So, straight out of school, my first job interview, the HR manager asked me, "So, where do you see yourself in the next 5 years?" Mind you, it was a marketing role. And I
Oh,
said, "Well, I see myself owning a special school." And I can just
amazing.
imagine hearing that.
And you're thinking, but
I'm
this
wondering,
is
what's
not
this
that
young lady talking
line.
about? But
Right.
that's how far back I've gone with teaching. And like I said, I stumbled on it because one day I was sitting by my HR desk and I was like, I'm not satisfied. This is not what I want to be
Hmm.
doing. And I saw the ad apply, and that was how I started. And it's been a
Amazing.
decade plus. I've taught across, I think it's only in the crèche. I
Oh,
haven't worked in
wow.
the crèche. I've taught across preschool, all the way to reception. I'm currently in reception.
That's
But I would say the
amazing.
years I spent with my children is enough crèche experience. I have two children. So the years I spent with them is enough
Right. So you have the
crèche
first-hand
experience.
experience.
Exactly. Exactly. So
Oh
that's me in a
my.
nutshell, and all that I'm currently doing.
Amazing, amazing. Well done. It's a whole lot. Consulting, teaching, being a mom as well, because that's a full-time job.
Mhm.
I can only imagine. Well done to you.
Thank
Okay, so
you.
let's get on into our series. We talked about the unique child, the positive relationships, and
Yes,
now
that's
want to talk
right.
about the enabling environment. So, what I want to ask now is, how would you define an enabling environment in the context of the EYFS?
Okay, so I would say an enabling environment really, I mean, it's like the phrase or the word really explains enabling an
Right.
environment, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it has to do with the kind of environment, kind of learning environment that you put together for the children in your care or in your
Right.
school. Um, Now, when you add the word enabling, it's really an environment that would get them to where you want them to be, that would
Hmm.
help them achieve, that
Right.
would help them. And so, knowing that or using that definition, I'll say that's my own understanding of it. That's
Of the
my own definition. So,
context,
using
right.
that definition, you already know that it's not one peg fits all, it's
Mm-hmm.
different across the various contexts. I would
Okay.
put enabling environment in two boxes, right? And
Okay.
one will be the physical, and the other one will just be, the emotional and then how you feel. So an enabling
Hmm.
environment really is the space. So you cannot talk about the enabling environment without talking about space, 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 space. It's a space where children are learning and
Okay.
how they feel in that space,
I
right?
love
So
that.
what you really can't touch, the other aesthetics, what you cannot touch, what you can't feel, what you can't see, but the children have that sense. So imagine walking
Hmm.
into a classroom that is beautiful, all the resources laid out, everything there, but a child still doesn't want to be in that classroom,
Right.
and they're wailing and crying, maybe because they feel bullied, they feel out of place, or the teacher hasn't understood the child's needs yet and is not meeting those needs or not reaching
Hmm.
that child. So for me, an enabling environment would be both the physical and the emotional, putting it together
Okay.
and having that environment that enables the child to achieve and attain those targets that you've laid out for them.
Right. I absolutely love that. I love how you explain that it is not just about the space, it is also about how
Mhm.
the children feel in that space. I'm
In
thinking
that
about it, I'm
space.
like, okay, I've never really had to put it down in that way. I've never really thought that through, but I've always focused on the space that we create for the children. But I
Mhm.
love how you've led us to realize that it is also about how the children feel in the space that we have created. That
In
is
that space.
fantastic. So let's talk about this
True.
environment, this space. Do you think that it is important? Do you think it's an important part of the early years setting? Because for a lot of people, we just come, we teach, and you go back home. So it's about the academic knowledge or the academic skills that we cater to you. Do you really think that the environment has a part to play in the early years setting?
I would say it has a huge part to play. I mean, that's why it's one of the principles really of the EYFS. It's very important that your children have a safe environment. They know that they
Mm,
feel safe,
right.
both because I mean the children may not know if it's safe physically, right? But they start
Okay.
first by feeling the safety. So they want to know that they
Hmm.
feel loved. They want to know that they feel. I mean, I had a child in my class, very quiet child, and she wasn't feeling well for a few days. And every single day she came to class. And I kept telling her
Aw.
mom, she's not feeling well. Her temperature is high. But she was saying, Miss Chaka, she doesn't want to stay at home. She wants to
Aw.
go to
Come to
school. If
school.
my classroom is not enabling, children are very sensitive. She would not come
Right.
to school. She would not want to come
Hmm.
to school. So it's really about them feeling safe. So it's totally important. It's important that they have a place where they could explore. It's important that they
Hmm.
have, or they feel like they have a place where they could ask questions and they feel like their questions are being answered. You know,
Right.
that's really that's really key to having an enabling environment, and that's what makes it very important
Hmm.
for the children. So it's not I mean, what are you really teaching if your environment is not
Is
enabling? Like the learning
right.
it's not going to go in. You're going to really be doing a lot of work. You'll be doing a lot of screaming because the children are not
Okay.
hearing you. So it's really, really important if you'd
Okay.
ask me.
Fantastic. I love that. The children need to feel safe. They need to know that they are loved and cared for in that environment. And yes, I
Very true.
agree with the fact that if the children do not feel safe, learning is going to be tough for both the
Very tough.
teacher and for the children. I
And
think
the
a lot
children.
of teachers need to understand that the children need to feel safe first before you now start to focus on what you're teaching and the learning process. Okay, so do you
True.
think that there are some common misconceptions that educators have when it comes to making an environment enabling? Do you think there are some common misconceptions?
Yes, I think so. I think misconception number one is that it's expensive or that it's going to cost them something. I think if you ask me, I'll say the first thing you really need to have wouldn't cost you a penny, and that's
Hmm.
genuine love.
Oh,
Once the
wow.
children can sense love, from your words, from the way you interact with them, seeing them. Children love to be seen. They love to be seen. Seeing them, understanding that I mean, I could sound, it may sound funny because you just think, are they not kids? Are they not below 5? These people are very sensitive. They really do have a lot of understanding. So so one misconception is that it has to be expensive. It doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't even have to cost so much. If you could think about, okay, imagine I want to teach, or that term, I have a theme on, let's say, cooking. I could bring the items that I have in my house, or ask my neighbors if I don't have so many. Ask my neighbors, ask people in church, ask people around. Oh, please bring. Can I have pots? Can I borrow your pots for a week? Can I, use this for? So it doesn't have to be expensive. That's one misconception that educators have. Another one is that it has to be colorful. I know some people will be shocked. No, it doesn't have to be colorful. So the thing is, some children may have sensory issues when there are too many colors in the classroom. So it doesn't have to be colorful. You just have to have the nice blend of colors, or keep the colors out and use more pastel, more neutral colors. But it really doesn't have to be colorful. It doesn't have to, it doesn't have to be colorful. It can just be plain colors. Children would still learn in a plain environment. For me, I would say I learned this, let's say 4 years ago, was when I had my own moment of, oh, really? It doesn't have to be colorful. I thought if I throw in some yellow, throw red, throw purple, throw this,
all the pop-up colors.
No. And I noticed that period, my class was always noisy. Like I couldn't get my children to settle down. So there's a thing with having too many colors in the classroom and having proper classroom management. It starts with how your classroom looks. Like some children their heads are already spinning when they see too much color.
Too many things
too many colors. So you don't have to use too many colors. Another misconception I would say is that you have to do too much. Your classroom has to be full. I always do this when I'm done setting up my classroom. I walk around. Like I walk around. I just try to walk around. I stand at different points. I try to run around. I just put myself in the shoes. Your classroom doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to have everything, but it should represent most things. It doesn't have to have everything. You don't need to put everything in the classroom. It's going to disrupt your classroom management when the term begins. So you want to just have that safe middle ground. Not too much, not too little, but just enough for the children to explore. And you can always keep introducing, you don't have to put everything all at once. You could introduce them week on week. And as the weeks go by, you just add on and all. So those misconceptions. So yes, there are many. I think there are many more, but those 3 are the major ones, really.
Okay, I think a lot of teachers have a lot to take away from this, because that idea of being colorful, being a bit too much with everything that you're going to teach during the term. Now we understand that you don't have to put everything, but represent most things. That is good. So now that you've clarified the misconceptions, now can you share with us some key elements that you think early years practitioners should consider when they are setting up a learning space for the children?
Okay, so first would be safety. I said that before. So safety, it has to be safe. The learning space has to be safe. It has to be safe because if your children are getting hurt, or if it's not safe, you cannot make so much progress, right? Because you're going to be dealing with one hazard or one injury or the other every single day, and that's going to interrupt your own learning, the learning and all. So it has to be a safe environment. You want to check that the furniture in the classroom, they're safe. You want to check that there are no nails poking out. You want to be sure that whatever you've set up, there are no pins on the displays. You want to be sure that there is enough space, because children would run.
Want to move around, right?
They would move around. They would want to run, even if you over time let them know that the classroom is not the running space, but initially, before they begin to understand your classroom rules, they would want to run. So you want to have enough space to allow them express themselves, safely, so that there is no tumbling. You want to have a space where their bags will be, so that you just want to ensure that the environment is safe. You're checking all the corners to make sure the environment is safe. Another thing would be to ensure that really all the centers are represented. So you want your classroom to have that, you want the children to walk in and see the different centers. And because some children may not thrive in literacy, some children may not thrive in numeracy. They may be thriving in understanding the world. So you want to have a center that caters to that child's interest. You want to have a center that caters to the interest of a child who is really interested in arts, who is interested, you want to have the different centers represented in your classroom. Good. And I know some teachers are probably thinking, oh, my classroom is really small. How will I do that? Like I said, you don't have to put in everything and you can just be introducing over time. It could just be a picture. It could be a picture of, something recent, but every center should be represented so that every child feels like when I walk into my classroom, there is something for me. They don't feel out of place. And like I said, you may be thinking these children are 0 to 5, and so they don't really understand. They do, right? So some children may just feel out of place because they feel like the class is not speaking to them. I think in a nutshell, you want the class to speak to each and every child in your class. So it's important that your centers are showing. Another thing would be outdoor.
Okay.
I was speaking to someone recently and she said, well, in her school, there was really no space for outdoor. It was a small school. It was just like a 2-story building and everything was inside. There was really no space for outdoor aside from the playground. And imagine not having the space. So there's a car park and then there's a playground, right? I said, well, you could turn the playground will not be occupied all through the day. You could turn a part of the playground to your outdoor, and it doesn't have to be a static outdoor center. Right. You could set up your outdoor center. That's why planning comes in. You could set up your outdoor center for your children when you want to access it. And when you're done, you pack up, take your things back. I remember years ago, I had this trunk. I had with everything inside it for a period. For the early part of my children's lives. My children are currently 9 and 8. So when they were a lot younger, I was homeschooling them. So all my homeschool, everything was just in one box.
In one place,
I used my living room. I think what I did then was I just got some stickers, stuck it in a corner of my living room. Google was reminding me recently of those pictures. And, I stuck them in the corner of my living room, just beside my TV, because that was our circle time, area. And that's where we sat on the rug to, do some learning, do circle time. And then the outdoor space I had was just beside that, and there was a sliding door dividing us. And when it was time for outdoor, I took our items out. We did what we had to do, and then we packed up and came back inside. So it's very possible to have like a mobile. Exactly. So outdoor is very important. It's really important because you want the children to really relate with their learning. It helps them build their vocabulary, because imagine if they're seeing things that are, when you're showing them a lot of plastic, that's not really what they see every day. It's good to have a mix. So allow them explore outdoors, let them expand their vocabulary, So outdoor is important when you're talking about enabling environments. Another thing would be, I said, having a place for everything, making sure that, because that helps you with giving them the right routines as well. So they get to understand. So, there's several more, but those are really the key. If you ask me, those are really the key ones.
Right. Okay. Okay, fantastic. Thank you for that. You did mention some part of the next question I was going to ask, but I'll still ask
Okay.
anyways, just in case there's some things you want to add. So what I wanted to ask was, how can we ensure that the learning spaces would reflect the children's interests, the children's needs, and then their culture? And then showing the
Mhm.
children that we actually care about. I know you mentioned a bit about it, but please give us more information. How can teachers deliberately ensure that the space reflects the interests, needs, and cultures of the children?
Okay, so first thing would be to know your children. So you want to first know them. Initially, you may not have the time to really know them in terms of their personalities and things,
Okay.
but you might have the time to know if you have children who are foreigners in your class who
Mm,
um, don't necessarily come from the home country where
yes.
you're teaching, and you could have something ready for them. You could have
Okay.
something planned out in your, let's say, classroom displays or in your center. So it's important that you know your children, because when you do know them, it helps you plan. It helps you
Yeah.
plan your environment properly so that the children feel like they're at home. And
Mm,
what I mean by home now is not their physical home environment, but it just feels like you thought about them
yeah.
and they're being catered for in the
Mm,
classrooms. So knowing your children is key. You also have to have safety in mind. I've said
okay.
that several times.
Yes.
You also have to have safety in mind when you're setting up your environment. So let's say you're teaching children between the age of 2 and 3, and you're going to be teaching them to write, and you have your sand tray there. Your sand tray shouldn't be at arm's length, because children will go there and they will want to put the sand in their mouth. It should be somewhere a little elevated. So you want to think about
Mm.
safety across board when you're setting up your environment. Because I wouldn't say classroom. Some people may be teaching outside of the classroom and all, but you want to think about safety when you're setting up your environment. You also want to you want to really understand what you could put in the different centers. It's not enough to just think, oh, I'm going to be teaching about dinosaurs, so put all the dinosaurs there. How about children who are afraid, who are scared of,
Dinosaurs.
and think they're alive? You have to really understand that some children, so you may introduce it one after the other. I feel
Okay.
like it's something that you always will find yourself tweaking when it comes to your environment. Take the current class I teach, for example. The classrooms are a bit more, will I say, mature than I'm used
Okay.
to, because this is my first year in this particular institution,
Reception.
and the
Okay.
classroom are more mature than I'm used to. But I noticed that the children in my class are not as, will I say, advanced as the ones in the next class. And so this mature
Mm.
classroom is not really working for them. So I
Okay.
had to really like tweak. I had to bring in some, toys. I had to really just do a bit to
Mm.
cater to them. And I did not understand this until second term, like the second half of the second
Oh,
term.
oh wow.
So like I said, it's ongoing. You're looking at your classroom, you're thinking, you're reflecting at the end of the day, and thinking about how your environment can further help the learners in your classroom, or
Okay.
in your, like I said, I've been saying classroom over and over again, but I know that there's some people who are not necessarily working in the
In the
classroom. So
classroom,
you
right.
have to, it's something that is constantly ongoing. So when you're reflecting, you're thinking, how can I further help them? And you tweak it as the need may arise at
All
the
right.
time.
Okay.
So I hope I got that right.
Yes, yes, you did. Thank you. Okay, so I wanted to talk about outdoor environment because I know a lot
Okay.
of people, when it comes to enabling environment, they're thinking, okay, the indoor environment, the classroom environment. And I know you've shared a bit about how there should be that opportunity for outdoor learning and how they can
Mhm.
utilize the small spaces by making sure that the outdoor space is not maybe a stationary one. You can move things in and out. So I just wanted to give more information to teachers who are still waiting to be convinced maybe
Mhm.
on why they have to go outside. I will give an example here. I've been to a school
Okay.
before where the school owner categorically said to me that the children don't need to go outside. They don't even need to go out to play. All they need
Oh,
to
wow.
do is come to school to learn in the classroom, that when they go
Mm.
out, they would get distracted. That was her own point of view, that they would get distracted and they have so much to do. So there's no reason to go outside. So, thinking of that kind of situation, some teachers find themselves in this kind of school. So, let us share more information. How do you think the indoor and the outdoor space work together to support the learning of children in the early years?
Okay, so I'm still rooting on what you just said.
Right,
No, it's
right.
interesting. It's interesting to hear. Wow, that's really interesting. I feel like that would be limiting some children. The
Mm-hmm.
outdoor space is very important. Outdoor learning is as important as indoor learning.
Right.
Um, I would say it's 50-50 really. First
Okay.
and foremost, children do not like to be confined in a
Great.
space, and this is not like, oh, almost all children do not like
Right.
to be confined in a space. They
Into.
would rather be outdoors, so
Mm-hmm.
when you have to keep them inside all through, that's doing them a disfavor. So outdoor is really
Mm.
important. And let me first debunk some myths. Outdoor learning is not the playground. It's not taking them to the playground alone,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's not taking them to go and play on the slides and all of that alone. That's not it. Outdoor learning is
Right.
also not taking your mat outside and sitting down and doing your circle time outside and then going back inside. That's not really it. Outdoor learning, I feel like you should even just probably do a video on outdoor learning because it's
Right.
a whole lot. Outdoor learning is really taking your learning outside. So imagine I'm teaching the children the number three, for example, and in numeracy that week we're learning number three, right? I'm going to be teaching them to form the number. I'm going to be teaching them to, it depends on the class, spell the number. I'm going to be
Right.
teaching them to count out to the number three, right? All of this can be done outside. You know,
Mm.
they could form their numbers using sticks in the sand. They could count
Amazing.
out bugs. If they find butterflies, count how many can you find? Can you find up to three? So outdoor learning really is structured, unstructured play. So
Mm.
it's
I
structured
get
because you
that.
planned to go outside, but it's also unstructured because you use whatever you find outside. You
Right.
know, you use whatever you find outside. So it's really important because some children may not really respond to you on the inside. And then suddenly, when they go outside, because they feel free, you hear them saying things, you hear them talking, you hear them, children talk amongst themselves, even those who may not necessarily speak to you. You just hear their vocabulary, you hear them building, you just hear them saying things, and you're like, oh my goodness, and you're assessing, you're observing as you're going, you're noticing that this child who would not respond to you in
Mm.
class, maybe that
Is
child is
now
even
becoming
just, it's
vocal.
exactly, is now becoming vocal. Maybe the child in the class is just looking at all the beautiful displays you have around, or thinking about the building blocks and when they're going to get the time to play with the building blocks. But
Hmm.
when you take them outside, they're now suddenly able to focus and hear
Yes,
what
there's
you're
that
saying. So
freedom
it's
that
really
comes with
important.
it.
Exactly, because yes, being outside, even for adults, being outside just has something to do with you thinking, I'm free. Suddenly I can just be, it's really important that children get to come outside, or go outside and also explore the outdoors. And
Mm.
there's something about bringing the real life to their learning. You could
Okay.
just be abstract and be showing them things and all of that, but by the time you're using real life objects, you're using
Object.
sticks, you're using things on the outside that they would see even at home, you'll be shocked that by the time you talk to a child about counting out butterflies outside, when they get back home, they're counting the clouds, or when they're in the car going home, they just want to, you give
Actually,
them the
to
opportunity to
practice.
further explore
Right.
their learning, to practice, to further explore
Mm.
their learning. So
Amazing.
that's one of the reasons why I feel outdoor, it's a no-brainer. It has to happen. Do it,
Mm.
take your children outside.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. This is very convincing, I must say, and I hope that teachers take this and they understand that outdoor learning is as important as your indoor learning. So I know you mentioned earlier that creating enabling environments does not have to be expensive. But so what can we say about creating spaces with limited resources and then maybe a smaller budget for the school? How can that be done when they have not a lot of resources and they have limited budget? How can that enabling environment still be created?
Okay, so this takes me back to when I was homeschooling my children.
Okay.
And, of course, you don't want to spend so much. I also, well, you don't want to spend so much buying resources here and there. Not everybody can. Some people can
Mm-hmm.
buy all the resources all at once.
Okay.
But I didn't think I was going to be homeschooling, so I didn't really have time to plan.
To
I
plan
just
it
knew that my child had a need at the time that I needed to address. It wasn't going to be addressed
in
in
the
school.
classroom.
I needed,
Okay.
exactly, it wasn't going to be addressed the way I wanted to address it. I needed to sit back, and my son had a speech delay. So
Oh, I
I
see.
knew what to do, right? And it wasn't happening in the
In
school
the
at the time.
school.
So I knew I
Okay.
had to withdraw and work with my child and do what I knew to do, and
Right.
it did work. After a few months, he started to talk and then, of course, built his
Oh,
vocabulary over
great.
time. But what I did was I used the resources, and this is what I'll tell educators: use the resources that are in front of you, that are available to
Okay.
you. Your classroom may look like a mess at first, but it's all up to you as well to, still keep the order. For example, my children started counting and filling in missing numbers at the time, and I had all these packs of eggs and we've eaten our eggs. We keep the pack somewhere
Okay.
on top of our cupboards. And I'm like,
Okay.
bring them all out. I did that, brought them all out, wrote numbers on a white piece of paper and cut them out, put them in the pack of
Okay.
eggs. There was a pack of
Okay.
12. Yes, I had a pack of 12, I had a pack of six, and I just lined them up like that in a row. And I put the numbers in, took out the missing ones, had them first count, then took out the ones that would be missing. And we did that. So you
Hmm.
just use things at your immediate disposal.
Okay.
You take things from the house. You could use tins. You could use, if you want to teach them 3D shapes, get tins, go around and get
Okay.
tins. Get boxes, if you want to create some things, and make Pinterest your friend. There are things available
Hmm.
on the internet. If you could use cartons to make different things in your classes, and cartons are being thrown, they're being trashed everywhere.
Every now
You
and
could go
then.
to your closest supermarket or the store beside you and ask for cartons and tell them. They're always willing to help teachers. When you say, oh, I'm a teacher and I just want to make
I
use of
need
it,
this.
they're always willing to help teachers. There's just that bias that they have towards us, right?
Right.
So you could always just create different things. It will take time. That's why you have to plan ahead, but you could
Okay.
create things without having to spend money. Use the things
Hmm.
at your disposal. If your school doesn't have that much of a large budget for resources, think out of the box. Think, what can I use from my house that would make this work for my children? And over time, you find that it's working for you, and it's interesting. Your creativity level would actually increase because you'll just be
Right.
creating out of
Right.
nothing. You know. So that's what I would say. Use the things at your disposal.
I love that. And there's so many things that we can actually have at our disposal. That is fantastic.
Exactly.
Thank you for that. Okay, so now let's talk to the new teachers, those ones who are coming in
Mhm.
newly. Maybe they started in September or in January, or they're looking to start next September. And then they're thinking, okay, I'm hearing all of these positive relationships, unique child environment. Now, what do you think are the must-haves for them when they have to set up their learning space for the very first time? No experience. I have a classroom. I need to set it up. This is my first time ever. What do you think are the must-haves that you would recommend to them?
Like I said, the first thing really, if you ask me, it doesn't cost you anything. The first thing really is genuine love. for the
Right.
children you're going to be working with, and be very lavish with it. So
Okay.
you find some teachers. I don't think I know any any EYFS teacher that is quiet. You cannot be, because you have to be expressive for the sake of the learners that you're working with. So you may be a reserved person, but they really have to see.
Okay.
They're hearing you every day. Reaffirm your love for them.
Oh.
I love your hair. How are you? Hope you had a good, you're just reaffirming it in words. You're reaffirming it in, how you relate with them. They need to see that you have genuine love and care for them. Like, do it every day. Do it over time. Remind them. I have this very wonderful young man in my class, and when he's been wonderful sometimes, and after I've corrected him, I'll just remind him and say, you're my baby boo boo. And he likes to hear that, when he's not happy, or he feels like he's been cheated out of a toy, and I step in, settle that, whatever. I just end it with, you're my baby boo boo. When I say that, he just says, okay, Miss Chiaka is there for me. So they
Right.
need to know that you love them. Right? That's what I would say is number one. Secondly, you just have to have safety you have to have safety at the back of your mind. So even if you don't know anything, just know that your classroom should be safe.
Has to be safe.
Go around it, ensure that, okay, these water bottles I've placed here, if water ends up spilling in this area that seems to be very wide and open, and children are likely to run through here, it's going to be a hazard.
Exactly.
So you need to have safety as well at the back of your mind. And like I said, colors, you may want to just do a bit of exploration and just understand more how to work with colors within your classroom. So it's just the basic things. Just, you don't have to know everything at the start. But first, like I said, give love first. It also depends on if you're the lead teacher or you're going to be working with somebody else. But first, what you have to give, that no one is requiring any experience for it, is love, right? Let them know that you care for them. Let them know that you see them. And then also think about safety. So 2 eyes, let's say 2 sets of eyes, so that's 4 eyes, is usually always better than 1 set, right? So you working with whoever has been put in the classroom with you, you're checking to make sure that everywhere is safe, everything is placed right. When you've stacked up some furniture in a certain way, you're checking to be sure that if children run and bump into it, it wouldn't fall and cause, so you want to check for that as well. So that's really what I would say for those who are starting afresh in the game.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Be lavish with the love. I'm holding on to
Yes.
that. So I can tell my teachers, be lavish with the love that you give to the
Very, very
children. Thank you
lavish.
so much for that. So let's ask, how important is it for the learning environment to be flexible and to evolve with the children's developmental needs? So you've talked about making sure that the resources are not so much, or the setup is not so loud. Now, do you think that as the children make progress, as they develop, do you think the learning environment also needs to evolve based on their needs, and then should it be flexible?
Absolutely. I believe it should evolve. It shouldn't say static at all. Like I said, as a teacher, will I then bring you home a bit and say, as an EYFS teacher,
Right.
you should be a reflective teacher. Always reflect. You're thinking, and it would be good if you have a journal, so you could also just put it down. You're thinking, okay, this child or this set of children, how else can I help their learning next week? Or what can I do? What can I bring to class to help them? What can I, you're just thinking. I mean, if you hear a child talking about, or this is what I do. If I hear a child talk about something over and over and over again, maybe a toy or maybe a cartoon that they really like, I use that to my advantage and to their advantage in the end. So what can I do? Right. There was a time I was teaching a child who really loved Paw Patrol.
Okay.
Loved Paw Patrol, and he will always talk about, oh, Paw Patrol this, so Paw Patrol, and he will mention their names, and maybe it helps because I'm a mom as well, so I know a
So
lot
you
of these
could
cartoons, and
relate.
because I'm an
Uh-huh.
involved mom, I also know the names of most of the cartoon
Mhm.
characters, so I could relate. I knew when he was talking about Chase, I knew when he was talking about Sky, and
Oh,
what I did at the time was I just got the pictures of these things, and his worksheet always had one Paw Patrol character on it or the other. At that
amazing.
time, I wasn't even teaching in the classroom. I was still doing
Okay.
one-on-one teaching in his home.
Okay.
And that really helped. That helped with his behavior management because suddenly he really wanted to get to the worksheets. He wasn't saying,
And
I'm
see which
tired and
character
all of
is
that.
on it today.
Exactly, because he could see the characters that he loved on the worksheet. You want to know if a child is always just singing, maybe singing a song. I'm a Barbie girl. There was a time I took my daughters, maybe 10 of my daughters' Barbies. I took them to class, and I just had them in a corner. And that helped a
Oh,
lot of children. I had the largest number of neurodivergent children in my class
okay.
last session for the first time. And I was like, what do I do with this? My sister-in-law was throwing away her daughter's karaoke box. It wasn't working.
Okay.
She was throwing it away. I said, can you give it to me?
I
And
need
I took it, put
this.
it in the corner of my class. And one of my children, two of them actually, they were very close friends, and one wasn't quite verbal. The other
Okay.
was, but because his friend wasn't verbal, he didn't used to talk much. But
Oh,
after school, when others are going home, pick up time, after school, you just find the two of them go to the karaoke box and then you hear them singing. And one day I heard them singing one of, Nathaniel Bassey's song. And I'm like, look at that
oh,
from start to finish. I'm like,
oh,
look at that.
wow.
These children,
They're
but because
taking
I
it
was paying
in.
attention, and I knew that, okay, this karaoke box is likely going to help some children in my class who aren't verbal. Let's
Right.
take it there and let's see what they will do with it.
With
So if
it.
you just have to always be paying attention, you want to observe your children, you
Hmm.
want to go back and reflect on what you have observed and
Hmm.
then make your adjustments. So it's really an ongoing thing. You're thinking, what else can I add to my classroom? What should I remove? Because sometimes you have
Right.
to
You need
remove
to
some things.
remove.
Sometimes you have some things in your classroom that are distracting the learners, that are maybe working for a set of people, but distracting all the others. And so
Hmm.
you might have to take it out of your classroom. So you just
Hmm.
always have to reflect, think, you're assessing your children, you're observing them, and you're thinking about what else you can do or what you should take out.
Fantastic. Talk about being an intentional teacher. That there is a
Exactly.
whole lot. There's a whole lot that we should do for the children. Thank you so much for all that you have shared. So the next question I want to ask is, now, do you think we're getting to the end now? Do you think that there are any resources, say maybe books or websites or courses that you can recommend for educators who still want to learn more about maybe everything EYFS or about creating an enabling environment particularly?
Okay, so first you want to download, check
Mm,
online, Google the EYFS statutory framework. You
right.
first want to really understand that document because
Hmm.
it talks to you about you get to learn more about enabling environment for the different age bands, right? Also you want to there's this book 0 to 5, I think Birth to 5
Birth to five
is what it's
matters.
called,
Right.
or this document. You want to also check Birth to 5. So that's really if you're focusing on the EYFS. If you happen to hear this and you're teaching the older classes, primary, college, and you feel like, well, I know they're talking about EYFS, but I need this for my classroom. You really want to check Pinterest.
Okay.
Pinterest is a huge resource for uh, ideas, creativity ideas when it comes to your classroom setup and what you could do in your classroom. But then don't just be a taker alone. When you're done, also create your things and allow others learn from you as well. Put it up on Pinterest so
Right.
that others can see as well. So don't just receive everything, also give back by putting yours
Hmm.
up as well. So
Okay.
those are I would say that that's where you should start from. And then over time, as you interact with other educators, ask your questions. Don't be an island. Ask questions.
Right.
Always ask questions. Be willing to also give, responses, because as you ask questions, you have your answers, and you have your own needs met as well. So ask questions, find out what they're doing in their classrooms, that could help you. Sometimes I haven't worked in a government school before, but sometimes I'm interested in hearing what they do in terms of
How they
resources. I'm
do,
interested in
right.
looking up at their pages on LinkedIn to know what they do in terms of resources, because they don't have as much as we do,
Right.
but they are making do with what they do have. So I'm always interested in knowing what they're using, and
Okay.
sometimes I eventually end up using them in my classroom as well, if it's going to help.
Right.
So yes, so just do a bit more research. There are materials available online. Just Google them, and then you'll find out more that you could do.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you
You're
so much
welcome.
for being here
Thank
with
you.
me today. So, for the
Thank you for
final
having me.
question, I'll just say,
Okay.
what's that one piece of advice that you can give to every early years teacher now about their classroom environment? What's that one piece of advice you would give before you go?
I would say um, let your classroom cater to every single child in your class.
Amazing.
That looks like a huge ask, but over time, as you keep doing it over and over, you get to find that you get better at reaching everyone in your classroom.
True.
So let it cater to each and every one of them. If you find that when you get your class list and you see, oh, I have a foreigner in my class, do something that speaks to that child. They're always glad to feel like they're more at home than they would
Mm,
have been. If you find a child who really loves to build, speak to that child in the way you set up your classroom, in the way you set up your resources. So let
okay.
your classroom speak to each and every child in your class, so that they feel more at home, so they feel welcome, they feel comfortable to learn
Mm.
in your classroom. So that's what I would say.
That is fantastic. Thank you so much. I would say that we have gained a lot. I have had so much to write here, and I cannot wait for everyone to learn from all that you have shared. It's been fantastic getting to see how much we have to talk about just on one principle. Enabling environment alone. I'm sure
Mhm.
that if we continue to go on, there'll be so much to share. But thank you so much for sharing this. I'm
So
hoping that
much
teachers would
more.
learn.
True.
Yes,
You're
I'm hoping
welcome.
that teachers would learn from this and would start to create that enabling environment that would help to also aid the teaching and learning process in the classroom. So, thank you
In
for
the
being here
classroom.
with me. We've come to
Thank
the
you so
end.
much for having me.
I look forward to seeing more of your work and I look forward to hearing more from you in the future.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.